Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ben Rouse. Ben, thank you so much for being with us today. We're really excited about this topic. We're really excited about this topic, as you can see from the chat. Lots of people also have some feelings about meetings and this topic, so it's always a great topic, and we're always looking for tips on that. So Ben, take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll share a few slides in a moment, and there's also a bit of interactivity coming up too. So I think I'm going to get pinned just to make sure when I share my slides they'll replace my video. So my name is Ben, and you know what? Before we get started, I'm just going to jump straight into activity. And I don't know if anyone's sort of done this activity before, but it's kind of one of my go-tos to kick off a lot of the meeting time that I have, which is, let me switch over, this one. So you might see now in place of my camera, it says, what is the worst way that this meetup could go? So it's an activity called Triz. You may have seen a few variations of it, but what I'd love for you to do in the chat is to add what is the worst way that I could run this time with you, your hard-earned time given up for a meetup? What would the worst possible way for me to do it be? Go as evil and as direct as you want in the chat, but what would be the worst way it could go? Over to you. Okay.
And feel free to put it in the chat. Is that what you said, or
Yeah, we've got them coming through now. So too many activities, go off track, not learning anything new. Tell us things we already know, no agenda, ramble or lecture, no takeaways, no interaction, it'd be boring. Touche. A waste of my time by your rambling. Okay, so talking, lots of rambling is not acceptable. Not telling anything about the topic, so we will get on to that. Perfect. Okay. This is something I use at the start of as many engagements as I possibly can, because you're never quite sure what people were there for. And I'll talk a bit more about my template for meetings and workshops that comes up. But now I'm very clear. If I talk too much, that's not acceptable. If I don't give you takeaways, that's not acceptable. And I just find a Triz activity where everyone describes the worst way it could go or the worst way you could solve a problem is a great, easy way of setting and getting expectations, which is one of the key things I'll talk about in terms of meetings. So thank you. Noted. I will make sure that I come back to these as we go. That is a very, very useful list of things not to do. And of course, what you can also do with this is you can flip everything around and you can get a good idea about what should happen. All right, so what I'll quickly do, for obvious reasons, I'm going to make it short, sharp, and swift, is I'll do a brief introduction. So my name is Ben. I'm a strategy facilitator. So that generally means I work with executive teams when they're looking at vision, mission, sort of values, moving that into objections and implementation. So sometimes it strays into OKRs, off-sites, retreats, and things like that. But maybe interestingly, I used to be a teacher. So I started as a maths teacher, so secondary school, high school. And I tell you what, while that might not be a similar background to many of you who are involved in it, maybe it's more of a product background across various corporates or different scenarios. What it does mean is a lot of facilitators that I speak to or people who run meetings, they worry about the kind of awkward, difficult attendees. And I never really as concerned about difficult attendees because trust me, you can never be like Denver, the kid that was in my year 10 class on a Friday afternoon every week. And honestly, if a meeting went in that way, that would be completely, yeah, you'd really know about it. So we've got some other teachers as well. Ah, Joe, Jamie, yourself as well. Okay, so it's not the weirdest route into this then. Um, so just to give you a kind of idea what my day to day looks like, offsite strategy sessions. So this was with a mental health scale up recently, involving them kind of deciding which direction they want to go and how they work together. This one's always interesting. I often get asked to do something about a design sprint. Now, obviously, speaking to a group involved in Agile, and particularly if you're focusing on Scrum, then sprint means something different to you. And it often means something different to the people who bring me in. They want a design sprint, but they don't. They want me to talk about design sprint in about 2 hours to 100 people. So that's often what tends to happen. But then a lot of the work is a lot of sticky notes, trying to work out mission, vision, and values so decision making can get a bit easier. So in Denver, yeah, Denver, Colorado, nothing wrong with. There just happened to be a student called Denver, so hopefully they're not related in any way. So that's kind of just a brief introduction to what it looks like. But what I found was that people generally got to the end of the sessions with me and they said, how can I apply this approach to my work? And they generally related that back to meetings. So they said, my meetings don't run as I want them to. I really like what you've done. How can we apply that? So that's what led to what I'm talking about today, which is a course that I created called Turn Meetings into Workshops. So I took various sources of inspiration. These are kind of like my 5 go-to books. I'd love for you to share in the chat. What are your go-to books or websites, reference points for gathering people together and making that time really effective? I've kind of gone with, I love flicking through game storming and picking out a few extra activities I can use for different scenarios. Um, the art of gathering is just more about that wider piece about how and why people gather together. Okay, Amy's on board with the Priya Parker one as well. Sprint, I don't know how does sprint go down in a more agile Scrum scenario where so Jake Knapp's book Sprint about the design sprint, the 5-day process. I imagine you've all been pulled into the AJ and Smart funnel at some point, and probably found out that the sprints go down to 4 days. And then liberating structures. And the one on the right, has anyone just a +1 in the chat if you've had a look at how to design and teach workshops that work every time? So that one, not a big book, but I find that really, really useful for just some practical tips. I see we've had Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. Can I add? I should add in The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, actually. If you've not had a chance to read the Power of Moments, that one's amazing. That I reference a lot of the time in different things as well. So those are a few of the books that I go for, and I pulled all that together along with what I do, and I've run a half-day version of the course, which was in person. I was really, really lucky that Sam Carpenter, who you can see on the screen there, and conveniently, I've got her website in there too. So Sam offered to come along and graphically capture the whole of that session, which was a huge bonus. And when I put my camera back on, you'll see behind me, I've still got that stuck up on my wall. Then I did a full day version. And then some people said that they couldn't quite make it. And so I did an online version. Let me just wait 1 second. Just before I talk about the online version, on the left-hand side there is a little activity called meetings or workshops. So the first version of the course was called How to Run Productive Meetings or Workshops. And the next version of the course was Turn Meetings into Workshops. And it was only in the second running of the course that I actually realized I hadn't defined what a meeting or a workshop is. So this is where I want to get a little bit interactive. And it'll be really, this is where I also think there's huge value in the group. I'm going to ask you to list all of the gatherings that you facilitate in any way. And what I'd love for you to do is decide whether you think they're a meeting or a workshop or something completely different. So there's a link here, and I think Ange also has the direct link to a Miro board that she'll be able to place in the chat for you. And what I'll do is I'll switch over to the Miro board, where I'd love you, if you're able to jump in, and you should see, if I switch over, I can share that with you. Okay, let's have a look. There we go. Welcome, everyone. So what I'd love you to do is think about all the gatherings that you have, where you have to gather together either one person or 500 people. Would you call it a meeting? Would you call it a workshop? Would you call something else? And once you've decided that, anything you call a meeting, just put a brief description on a blue sticky note. Anything you'd call a workshop, put a description on a pink sticky note. And anything you call other, give me a description on a yellow sticky note and tell me what you'd call it. Okay, thank you. I can see everyone arriving in. So just as a repeat, blue sticky note if you think you'd call it a meeting and just give me a description about what it is. um, pink sticky note if you'd call it a workshop and then give me a description of those type of engagements that you have. And then other for anything that you don't think is either a meeting or a workshop and you'd call it something completely different. Really appreciate you getting involved in this. It's such value add for me. Okay, so nice. Having a coffee, all hands planning, presenting a process flow. Okay, so just while you're adding those in, I'll give you a bit of context. In the first version of the course that I ran, I didn't define meetings or workshops. I just kind of bundled them together. And the question came up of like, which one's which? So in the next version of the course, I did an activity like this with the attendees where I asked them to write down everything that was meetings, everything that was workshops. Then in preparation for this, I was suddenly aware that if I'm encountering a load of people who are really into their agile approach and some are Scrum Masters, that meetings and workshops isn't quite going to cut all of those descriptions as well. So that's why I've added this extra bit in the middle just for you to kind of gather it in there. Okay, I can add the picture in on the slides as well. Neat. All right, keep going with those as we gather them. Something you can do if you've got the Miro board open in the background while I carry on is I've also below added an axes. So this is what I also did in the session in the course was once people had written all their different meetings and workshops on the vertical axis, I asked them to sort of tell me how productive they felt each of those different examples was. And on the horizontal axis, I asked them to sort of arrange them from sort of a one-to-one at one end to, let's say, like you're doing some massive conference engagement at the other. So once you've added your meetings, workshops, or other, if you're willing to, I'd love you to place them on that axis. The horizontal axis being the size, like how many people, and vertically, how productive you feel those particular gatherings are. From at the bottom, they're just a waste of time, up to the top being sort of really productive time that is really effective. Amazing. And Jamie, what a great group. This is amazing. I'm loving this. I also know to be aware that I've given you a task to do. And by rights, as a good facilitator, I should be quiet and just play some music. but I'm also aware of your time. So forgive me if I start to sort of move into the next bit in a moment, but I've now distracted you all with a Miro board. So feel free to just jump into that and ignore me for the rest of the session if that feels a lot easier as well. Having a coffee, I've noticed, has come up as really, really productive. One-to-ones. Sprint planning, feeling less productive. A retro is usually less productive. You're going to have to educate me on Scrum of Scrums. I need to find out what that is. If you're willing to share in the chat a description of what a Scrum of Scrums is in a bit more detail, that would really help me out.
Well, Scrum is a scaling technique. So you would have multiple Scrum teams that you're scaling up, and then your Scrums would be like the group of Scrums. I don't know. Someone could probably explain it better, but it's a scaling technique.
That makes sense. Thank you. Okay. Now, sorry, so we're going to add in a description there. Feel free.
Scrum of Scrum, you're looking to address dependencies and make sure you're aligning forward as far as the deliverables and for the sprints.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
I was going to say, to piggyback off that, to align on dependencies and to also, depending on the organization, like try to find alignment and coming up with standardization for certain processes and things like that. Essentially just think of it as like, not necessarily a status meeting or a retro, but it's somewhere in between there with all Scrum Masters.
Neat. That really, I knew when coming into this that I'd probably learn more than I'd give. And I think that's holding true so far. Thank you for sharing those meetings, workshops, or other. And then extra thank you for starting to move those over onto that axis as well. Now, look, there's no definitive answer. Some of you might be looking at it saying, well, actually, I think you'll find that my retrospectives are very productive. Thank you very much. And you might want to move them. But what's just useful for this is I wouldn't say I've got a definitive, this is a meeting, this is a workshop. But what I have found with this activity is that generally people tend to go towards a meeting being a more informational gathering. Here's some information that you need to know about, and it's going to be imparted to you. And then generally I've found that people have felt that the workshop is where you've got a problem that needs solving. That's what's come out of the time I've had with various groups in the sessions that I've run, where we've had this one. So it's really interesting to get a contrast with your different perspective on I wouldn't say it's coming out exactly the same way. You'll also notice, and this one has been the case in the sessions that I've run, that the pink sticky notes, the workshops, have generally been higher. But it was similar in one of the sessions that I ran, the second of the course runnings, where those meetings with less people were generally considered to be more productive as well. So some similarities in there, but I think in some of the specific meeting types, workshop types, are definitely value add for me. Amazing. So I'll leave you to sort of play around in that board a little bit. There's another Miro board that I'm going to share. But what I want to do first is I'll quickly jump back onto my slides. So you'll see me for a moment, but my slides will be back on in a second. And the reason I want to do that is there's a couple more bits of information I'll share before we get into another activity. So that was really useful. That meetings or workshops question came up. And you can see on the previous slide, there's a version of that we did in the session. Off of the back of the 2 in-person sessions, I had a few people say to me, I couldn't make the day, or the location wasn't quite right. So I decided to try and do a webinar online version of the Turn Meetings into Workshops course. And I'll get into the detail of kind of what my approach to this is in a moment. And to facilitate that webinar course, I created a Miro board, quite an extensive Miro board, which I'll switch over to show you now. I definitely went a bit too deep on the Miro board creation, and you'll see what I mean if I switch over to it now. This one. So now I'm sharing my Miro board that I created for the online course. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Canvas, CNVS. It's created by someone called Lucy, and that's where I got all of these little icons from. So wherever you see a sort of a little person or people and all these numbers and various things and escalators and lifts, that's all just a package that I purchased through what Lucy, the thing that Lucy's created. So here's the Miro board. I will share a version of this with you all very, very soon. I've got some slides from the course. I've got, like, we did a TRIZ at the beginning, and there's a version of that you can copy and use. There's a sailboat activity, as well as sort of an idea creation and an impact effort scale related to the course. So this is the Miro board I created. But what I'll do is I'll take you through a version of what the course looks at. And this is the meta bit. I created the course using the template to then share the template. I'd love your feedback on this, though, as to what you think might be missing or what you'd maybe add a bit more emphasis to. So in the course, I take people through the idea that you're going to, like, what's the objective of the meeting? What are you actually there for? And who is the audience? And one of the things I personally think is really important is not only getting the right people in the room, but removing the wrong people from it as well. If you're trying to hit an objective for the wrong people, it's always going to be a problematic gathering together. So getting the objective and the audience right at the start is really important. And then I did that TRIZ activity with you at the start because I wanted to sense check my assumptions and my expectations against yours. So here's the version that I did in preparation for this. My objective was to share the background and approach to creating my course, Turn Meetings into Workshops. And who is it for? Well, it's for the meetup attendees in the Scrum Masters of the Universe community. My assumptions were these. So my assumption was that you are a knowledgeable group when it comes to sort of managing groups and teams. You'd like to learn something. And I also, my sort of assumption was that you have expertise I can learn from, and that's already been proven true, and I think will continue to be. My expectations, that some of you will be willing to participate in a Miro board, that was definitely true. You'll be happy to share your questions and ideas, also seems to be a fair expectation. And my expectation was that you'd be looking for takeaways. And that was made very clear in the TRIZ activity at the start. But what I didn't know going into it was your assumptions and expectations. So that TRIZ activity was just a really nice way for me to understand clearly that I need to stop talking very, very soon. That I need to share new ideas, and I need to make sure that there are takeaways. So I went into planning it this way. I'd do my introduction, I'd share the course, which I'm in now, and then I sort of share a bit of a reflection. And there's this bit here where you'll get to explore the course as well. So this was how I planned what we're doing right now. We've done our TRIZ activity. We've done our meetings or workshops, and you'll see there's one more activity waiting to go. Just while I'm in here, again, I mentioned AJ and Smart earlier, their funnel, if you even think for a moment near a device about facilitation or design sprints, then AJ and Smart will find you. and you'll get dragged into their funnel. But one of the things I've really taken from the work that they do is their 4 C's: collect, choose, create, and commit. And that's a structure I use a lot, and I give to people that I work with when they're thinking about planning meetings. Generally speaking, the people that I work with on this course are sort of senior leaders in organizations, but they don't have a lot of time. And when they're trying to plan an effective meeting, just giving them a simple framework like that can be really useful. So I've collected your assumptions, expectations. We did a bit of choosing in the meetings and workshops, and then I'm going to give you a chance to create in the activity grid. So that's a very brief sort of run through of the Miro board that I use for facilitating that process and taking people through the process that they can use for their own meetings. I've got one more thing though that I need to share before we get into the next activity, and it's a bit of a, failure really. I set up this course and I built this Miro board, and then I sold 1 ticket. So the 4 C's: collect, choose, create, and commit. So I sold 1 ticket, and I had this problem where it got closer to the date. I was doing a bit of promotion. I think, Jamie, you might have seen me talk about this course on Natty's podcast. Might be in the connection. So Natty, who does a podcast about facilitation, had me on for an episode. I'd shared all of this stuff on there, and I hadn't sold any tickets. So I got in touch with Claire, who's the one person who bought a ticket, and I said to her, do you want a refund? Or I could redesign it and we could do a one-to-one, focus on the meetings that you want to work on. And she said yes to the one-to-one. I then got a ticket sold like the night before the official first date of the course. So I then had to go back to the second person and say, I'm really sorry, it's kind of changed because I'd only sold 1 ticket, but would you like a refund? Or would you like a one-to-one version of it where we can focus just on your meetings? And they said one-to-one. And then because of that, I'd done something wrong with the link that was out there, someone else bought a ticket like a week after the course was meant to have started. So I had to say again, really sorry, it's kind of changed. Would you like a refund or would you like a one-to-one? So I now have a completely new, different version, which is a one-to-one coaching where they tell me what meetings they've got coming up that they want to turn into workshops. And I work with them over like 3 90-minute sessions. So yes, I sold 1 ticket, but it's actually turned into something I really enjoy. So that's kind of where I will just kind of share a few learnings, and then I've got one more activity for you. What did I learn along the way? First time I ran the course, I did a sailboat activity. So where you put what's going well, what's putting wind in our sails, and then what's not working. And everyone wrote these things about their meetings that weren't working. They were absolute gold, but I didn't leave enough time to actually do anything about it with them. So that was my first learning. I needed more time to actually listen to what people wanted to do. In the second version of the course, I learned that I needed to define my terms. What is a meeting? What is a workshop? And in the online version, I learned I'm not very good at marketing and sales, but sometimes things work out, and I've got a kind of lovely one-to-one session going on with a few different people. Neat. What I would love to do finally is back into that same Miro board that you were in earlier, where you were sharing your meetings and workshops with me. What's been really valuable is through the one-to-ones, I've shared things like the sailboat, Triz, my go-to activities. What I would love to share is, what are your go-to activities? And are they a collect activity? Are they a choose, a create, a commit? So if I just And if you've got that same link again to share, that would be really useful just for getting people back in again. And if I jump back into that board on the right hand side, so if you can see where we did all of the meetings, workshops or other, if you scroll over to the right hand side, I'd love you to share your go-to activities, the kind of mine are the sailboat, because you can use that in so many different scenarios, or that Triz activity we did at the start. I find that really, really useful. What are your kind of go-to activities that are maybe they're collect, maybe they're both collect and choose? Particularly though, I'm going to be honest, I'm lacking when it comes to commit activities. I do use a what, so what, now what, which is one from Liberating Structures. I find that one really, really useful. 15% solutions I see going in there. That's excellent. I love that one. But yeah, just would love to hear from you. What are your go-to activities? And I'm absolutely sure there'll be at least one per section that we've never seen and we want to learn more about as well. Amazing. So that is in theory what I wanted to share. I have gone through the course quickly, I appreciate, but I wanted to leave time for questions. So feel free to sort of jump into that board. The other thing I will share is this one here. I have made this one, I believe, let me just double check. No, I haven't. Here you go. So that one is anyone can view. So if I share this link in a moment, you are more than welcome to make a copy of my template Miro board, borrow whatever you need to, steal whatever you need to. And if there's anything useful in there, it's yours. Take it away. And
Do you have a
hopefully,
link to this Miro board?
yes, I'll put that in the chat. Oh, sorry, that's gone straight to you, Jamie.
That's
Let me put
okay.
it to,
I can
let me put
repost
it, let's put it to everyone. That would be more useful here. So
There, I got it. No problem.
template.
Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Yeah, so that then gives you the full template and you can you can borrow it and explore it a little bit more. But yeah, I'd love to open up to questions, feedback, ideas. As I said earlier, there are some things that I could do better or might be missing. And I'd love to hear sort of suggestions as well for kind of improvements. Maybe it's a bit selfish. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to be invited. Absolute pleasure to share. And
So much. I think, yeah, we can open it up to questions, I think. I know one thing I had was, could you go back to the slide with the QR code on it?
yes, absolutely.
That went by a little quickly.
That one.
Yes. Oh, so that's just a link to the Miro board?
Yeah, that's just that Miro one earlier.
Oh, got it. Okay. I thought maybe it was something else.
Cool. Shall I start picking up some of the questions that are coming in?
I was wondering what your distinction is between commit and choose.
Yeah, I saw that. So if you take an exercise like the sailboat, where you will say to everyone, okay, what's putting wind in your sails on this current project? And everyone will pepper above the waterline with positive things. And then you do what's holding you back, what are the anchors? And everyone will pepper below the line. And then you might do a vote on which are the most pressing challenges that are below that waterline. So that's what I'd categorize as a choose, is where you might do like a dot vote and align everyone together behind a kind of focus. So out of all of these things, which are we going to focus on first, or which is the most significant problem to solve? Same with ideas. If you've got lots of ideas and you might do a dot voting process. So that's what I call a choose. The commit being, what are we actually going to do? So beyond today, what are the actions? What are the next steps? Who's going to own each of those pieces? So that's kind of in my sort of how I would distinguish between them, is choosing is something we're doing in that time to narrow down which bit we're going to work on, and commit is how we're going to work on it. Who's going to do what, when.
So
Yeah,
basically,
thank you.
choose is the process of selecting, and commit is actually doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That was much more succinct than my version. I noticed you got a question from Karen. Definition of a meeting versus a workshop. I definitely dodged that. The impression, where I would generally sit on it, is meeting is informational. So here's what people need to know. Here's the information. Here's some processes we need to follow. And whereas a workshop is more where you've got a problem you need to come together to solve, is how I go for it. But what I appreciate is, let me lower my hand. I have dodged a definition because I think it's very changeable. And that's why in the first version of the course, it was sort of, I called it make your meetings or workshops more productive, or run productive meetings, and sort of I got all workshops underneath. But then it was in the second running of the course, I said to someone, they were like, why both? And I said, well, I was considering calling it turn meetings into workshops. So turn an informational thing into more of an interactive workshop. And they said, I definitely would have preferred that it to be called that. So then that's where I've gone more recently, is people seem to be keen to turn their meetings into workshops. But I think that's related to a lot of meetings are awful, and therefore people are keen to change them. So I think meetings have a bad rep because a lot of them are run pretty badly. And therefore that's an easier sell to say, turn it into a workshop, because you're talking about making it interactive, making sure you hear from everybody. So making it more inclusive, and just allowing people to have a pack of sticky notes and write what they're thinking avoids that one person dominating. So what you've just noticed there, hopefully, Karen, is I've completely taken a politician's approach to answering your question, because I don't really know how I define them distinctly yet. Okay. I see I've got one from Stephanie. How do you prepare your participants to use Miro? Which is a really nice question. I don't know anyone else who uses Miro regularly, but when you get people in for the first time, you need an activity to really help them navigate it. I do have one. So if you've gone into the link of the course, huge Miro board that I've got, there's an activity in the top left where I just ask everyone to share like their favorite food or their favorite film, which involves editing a sticky note that's already there, adding in a sticky note to one on the right hand side. So I tend to try and use a little simple activity that gets them to do the basics of create a sticky note, edit a sticky note, add an image, that kind of thing. I imagine there's probably some great advice from people in this call about, has anyone got a good game that they have on their Miro board to kick off? Okay. Oh, despite Karen's response, most meetings include action items, yet are not a workshop. Yeah, as I've already kind of fumbled around, I don't think there's a distinct. They're probably overlapping Venn diagrams. Okay, what is 10 for 10 and what is crazy eights? So 10 for 10 is a simple idea creation activity. You ask everybody, so you've got 10 minutes, you ask everybody to create as many ideas as they can. Everyone then writes furiously for 10 minutes, creates as many ideas as possible. You then give everyone sort of 5 sticky dot votes or whatever the appropriate amount is for the number of people. Everyone votes on the ideas and you then pull out the 10 most voted ideas. So you end up with a bit of maybe a pyramid of the top voted ideas and a few below that. So ultimately you come out with the 10 most actionable ideas that everyone's created in 10 minutes. So that's the 10 for 10. And then crazy eights is, and I see, Jamie, thank you for sharing that Miro template in there as well. Crazy eights is where you get everybody to come up with 8 different ideas to solve a problem. There are other alternatives that people use as well, but the one I tend to go to is if you've got a problem statement, like a how might we statement, you ask everyone to come up with 8 different ways to solve it in 8 minutes. So that can be done on a piece of paper where you just fold it like that. And you'll say to everyone, right, I'm going to give you 8 minutes. First minute starts now. Come up with an idea to solve that challenge. After a minute, you then say, now come up with a different way. After another minute, a third way, a fourth way, a fifth way. I tend to use it to free up groups who I feel are going to be a bit safe with their ideas. So if generally it's that group who you feel that they're going to say sort of fairly sensible things, it's an activity that you can get them to really think quite differently. Because after the fourth and the fifth, you have to think differently because you tend to run out of basic ideas that you can apply. And I personally say to people that you're not going to share these ideas. So the crazy eights is just for you. It's just a process they do individually. And at the end of that, we then go into something like a 10 for 10. And the crazy eights has kind of freed them up to think a bit differently before we go into sharing ideas along the way. I have occasionally used it where a group has come up with ideas that aren't really going to get us anywhere. And I'll do a crazy eight to just get them to think differently. And then we'll repeat the idea creation process. Neat.
Ange, did you see any other questions in the chat?
No, I don't think so. But this is your time. If you want to come up and raise your hand, we'll let you talk in person.
Yes, and equally, kind of what you might add in, what's missing, is obviously a value to me as I go into my one-to-one sessions with people. Thank you, Joanna. Yes. There's I said I used to be a teacher, and in the education space, I don't know if anyone ever used Google's Jamboard tool.
Mm-hmm.
It was around for a little bit.
Yeah.
It was a really simple whiteboarding tool. It's like it had, I don't know, probably only had about sort of 4 features. You could write, you could put some shapes in, but you had sticky notes. But it was really, really popular in schools. But as is Google's way, I think basically if a tool doesn't look like it's ever going to get 1 billion users, they tend to kill it. And I'm sure we've all used a Google tool that has been killed at some point because they killed a lot of them. But Jamboard was really popular in schools because it was so simple. Children could easily use it. There was just the cognitive load was so low. And I think that's what I found with Miro. That first time in Miro can be massively overwhelming for people when it sort of expands. And maybe I need to reflect on that in the size of the one I've shared with you all. But that's a really good point from Joanna around just having that little safe space to do the basics and be successful is a really nice point. Oh, RAM. Apple ecosystem has freeform on macOS. Ah, right. That's my evening sorted. Gonna go experiment with that.
It's super simple. And your boards are available across all, like if you create a board on your Mac or one device, if you're in the Apple ecosystem, it's available on all other devices and it's shareable.
Does it? So Jamboard had auto draw built into it, where you could draw something badly, and it would then use the sort of, I don't know if anyone remember Quick Draw, little game that kind of got you to draw something on demand, but it used that data set to then go, did you mean this, and give you like 5 versions of what you meant. Is there anything like that built into the freeform that anyone ran? Do you know?
Maybe on the iPad version, which I don't really use.
Mm.
I mostly use it on my Mac, so I don't see it. I don't see that here on the Mac.
Miro has that same functionality as well. Yeah. I have a question here from Stephanie. What would you do if you were in a workshop led by someone else and people were struggling with Miro or some other tech tool? So she said recently they spent days in a small group where several people struggled the whole time and kept complaining that Miro was terrible. It became distracting.
Good question. So I was doing my Triz activity in a workshop at the start for like expectations, and we asked what would be the worst way that this workshop could go, and someone put mansplaining on the board. Several people did actually. Like, I do not want to be mansplained to in this session. So you're like, absolutely. I imagine that happens enough every day. So that's where I would definitely feel, where do you jump in and be useful? And where I'm sure we've all had someone jump in and sort of say, oh, I can do this. And you're like, where's that balance between being helpful and kind of undermining? I actually had a session where there was someone was using their own tool that they built. They were the product owner and they were using it badly. That was the trickiest one to know what to do. Because they didn't use the functionality as you might expect. I didn't jump in on that one. Maybe I should have, I don't know.
What would you do, Stephanie? What did you do? Now I'm putting her on the spot.
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, I hadn't got a better answer for that myself. Oh, here we go. Okay, resistant.
Hi, Ben. I have a question, please.
Yes.
Yeah, I joined late actually, and I saw the link you sent on Miro.com. I'm just like, can you please explain to me how can I use the templates?
Yeah, so if you've got the one with all of the various buildings and elevators and various things, this one?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you've jumped in there, you should, if I've got my settings right, first of all, obviously be able to duplicate that, make a copy of that for yourself. More broadly, the way I've got the slides that I use in the course are all up here, just to give you a bit of context to how it's structured. The activities that I do, so here is what we were talking about in like getting started with Miro is, hi, my name is Ben, and you can have people just edit these ones, create new sticky notes. And just like we did at the start of today's call, everyone added in the chat the most frustrating thing about meetings. And I've got a little zoomed in bit here just to make sure everyone gets used to that. And then if you want to, you don't have to take the whole board. You might just decide that you're doing a session on Miro coming up and you want to copy that Triz and move over to your own board and paste it in. You're more than welcome to borrow things like that. So that might be an easier way to use it, just to sort of borrow some of the ready to go activities like the sailboat or the 10 for 10. And on the 10 for 10, what you can do once everyone's put in their, once they put in all of their ideas, is using the voting options as well. So they're just there for you to use if you want to. More broadly, this is the template that I share with people around what are the objectives, who's the audience, what are your expectations, assumptions, and theirs. And I just would encourage you to try and fill that in when you're thinking about meetings and workshops. Give yourself a bit of a basic structure. And then I've got I use the 4 C's to structure it, as well as some stuff taken from other books. And if you're interested in those books, they sit over here. So feel free to have a little walk around. And then just to give a bit more context, this is an example filled in for the course that I run. And this is an example, which is what I used to prepare for this session today. So this is based on this particular meetup. And you'll see the structure that I tried to implement today on there as well. I hope that gives a bit more context.
Sir, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problems
All
at
right,
all.
looks like we are right at time. I see that Saruchi, do you have a quick question here, Saruchi, or?
Not a question. I just read Stephanie's question, and I missed to answer that. If you don't mind, I can share thoughts in a minute.
Okay.
To my role in a workshop led by someone else. So I think one of the option which I applied in a workshop led by someone and other people are struggling through Miro is I could be comfortable to offer quick help, but not by overtaking the entire workshop. So I'm comfortable in taking them a little bit away and then quickly help them out during the workshop itself. Also suggesting some quick troubleshooting break, right? I mean, can we have a quick break and go over with the Miro tools and basics so that everyone else can become familiar with that, suggesting those options. And at the end, I would again try to reinforce on the focus of the workshop goals. I mean, the goal is not to get expert in Miro, but to achieve the outcome of the workshop that is they are learning from. So I would try to reinforce 2-3 options if I'll be the participant and I am familiar with Miro, but the others are not.
Yeah, I've also shared in the meeting invite, I've shared, like, if you're not familiar with Miro, here's a short tutorial. And there's tutorials out there that are pretty short that you can make your own, or you could just, there's plenty of them on Miroverse as well. And I might direct them to that now. Whether they do that work or not, I don't know, if they'll actually do it or not. But at least, you can refer back to, if you're struggling, click on that link that's in the meeting invite. Either could take you to some quick instructions that they can do. But yeah. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. And this was fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing with us and sharing your templates with us. That's amazing. And yeah, I really appreciate it and appreciate you being here today. So yes, I see some people clapping, giving you a round of applause. So
massive thanks to yourselves, Jamie and Ange, and the whole team for making this possible and putting in the work to keep on running these sessions. Thank you to everyone who came along, for jumping in the Miro board, for sharing as well. My bit was easy, really, compared to.
Well, if you think of another topic, you are welcome back anytime, Ben.
Well, I think I'm more of a viewer, participant as
There you
well,
go.
looking at
Oh,
some of the
that too.
sessions coming up.
For sure, for sure. I hope to see you around. And the rest of you, I hope to see you at some of our future events. Everybody have a great rest of your day. And what a great start to the week with this. So thank you again, Ben. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
Thank
See you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.